Many are quick to discredit Aptera because it's a two-door vehicle, it's got 3 wheels, and it's bizarre looking, so they just instantly say this is niche, this is not going to be a big market, and the company's not going to find much demand with these things, despite the fact they have over 30,000 reservations. But in today's video, I'm diving into use cases and examples that I think Aptera will flourish and perform very, very well in, despite the fact that the market is not quite factoring them in yet. Right now, I feel like Aptera is more of a small EV enthusiast company right now, with a very passionate community, but once the numbers start speaking for themselves, I think they're actually going to take off and be a lot bigger than most would expect. So the first example that I haven't seen too many people bring up is last mile delivery services. So no, the Aptera is not a cargo van, but it's actually a lot bigger than most people realize, with the company itself advertising 25 cubic feet of storage space, and if you were running a last mile delivery service, you wouldn't need that second passenger seat. You would just be the driver, and then the rest of the vehicle can basically go towards package storage. But there's actually a growing number of people that are acting on behalf of, Amazon or UPS or FedEx, where you can actually just take a bunch of packages in your own vehicle and deliver them yourselves, kind of like an Uber or Lyft situation. In fact, it's happened several times in my area, and I live in a pretty rural place, so I'm kind of surprised to see more and more people just driving around their everyday vehicle to deliver packages for Amazon or who have you. And the truth is, because Aptera is the most efficient vehicle on the market and has the solar charging, this will also be one of the cheapest ways to transport cargo. And I know it's not going to be as good at transporting lots of people because this is going to be a 2-seater, maybe a 3-seater option in the future that Chris referenced at Fully Charged, but a lot of packages are not ultimately that big. So I think that the last mile delivery services would make a lot of sense with the Aptera, even if it can't hold as much as a traditional van can, because you're going to be able to fit a decent amount of smaller packages in the vehicle and drive around for dirt cheap. The car is charging itself. It's extremely aerodynamic, so driving from the distribution center to delivery addresses is going to be much, much cheaper in this vehicle than any other. So I think that may end up being a fairly common practice in the future, simply for the cost of transportation. Next is one that I've thought of a lot over the past year, which is island rentals. So there's a lot of places, whether it's Hawaii or Puerto Rico or Jamaica, Costa Rica, places where lots of tourists are coming and renting vehicles for the day or for a weekend just to drive around the island, tour the place, and have a good feel for the area. And I think the Aptera would be perfect for that, because most of the time in these island climates you have a lot of sunlight to work with, so the car will continue to charge itself. And a lot of the time you'll just get couples or 1 or 2 people, friends, that don't need a huge vehicle, but they're willing to drive something around for the day. Like, I visited an island called Culebra earlier this year that was renting out Jeeps for the day, because basically you could drive everywhere on that island within that vehicle. And I was just thinking, how much cheaper would these rentals be to own and operate if you didn't have to rely on imported gas or diesel every single time someone was done using the Jeep or the truck? So an Aptera would be charging itself in this situation, doesn't have to drive that far, but you wouldn't even really need to worry about someone maintaining the things, as in plugging them in at the end of the day, because as long as they are parked on these islands, a lot of which aren't that big anyway, so even a 250-mile range or 400-mile range Aptera could drive you everywhere you needed to go on that island within a day, and then still top off thanks to the sunlight. That would make them far cheaper to operate. They don't require as much maintenance, and of course you don't have to pay for gasoline being imported to the island, which is more expensive than just free electricity from the sun. So I could see that becoming very common at resorts or vacation places where people are touring an island, and there's many tropical islands that people visit around the world, and I think that a lot of people already are renting cars when they're on trips, and typically they try to rent the car that is the cheapest. And what car do you think is going to be the cheapest to rent on a daily basis? Probably the one that costs the least to operate, and that's going to be the Aptera. So even if we're not talking islands, I just think that for the car rental business, Aptera is going to be an incredibly popular option, simply because I think it will undercut pretty much everybody else. Most of these new cars that you see on airport rental services are still costing $25,000, $30,000, or some of them $40,000 new. Tons of people love to rent Teslas with Hertz or third-party rental services that buy up Teslas so that people can rent them out. Aptera would still carry that electric cool factor, something that stands out, but you can still fit a lot of cargo in it, fit your boogie boards in it if you're driving it to the beach, but have a much lower cost upfront because it's not going to cost as much as a Model 3 does. And throughout the life of the vehicle, that break-even point of not having to pay for gas is a lot sooner because the energy consumption is substantially lower, plus the vehicle is charging itself, assuming you're in a sunny climate, which is a vast majority of the planet. Another really common one that will probably result in people flocking towards Aptera is food delivery services, because food delivery services don't typically have to have large amounts of cargo space. But if you're thinking of like pizza delivery vehicles or Uber Eats or DoorDash becoming more and more popular, people are going to just be seeing straight dollar signs when it comes to Aptera, because what dictates the profitability of working for Uber Eats or DoorDash is a lot of the time how fast, yes, or how many orders you can get, but also what it costs you to operate your vehicle to pick up food and deliver it to people. And the Aptera is going to have plenty of space for all kinds of pizzas or burger runs, taco runs, whatever people are ordering on food delivery apps, but it will cost a fraction of what it would cost for gas vehicles to drive around. So if some people are looking in between jobs and more people are using their vehicles as a source of income these days thanks to mobile ordering, the Aptera is absolutely going to be a great choice, because in the first place, most people who are doing DoorDash or Uber Eats typically do it by themselves, or if they're doing it with someone else, it's usually one other person, so it doesn't matter that the Aptera only has 2 seats, but it's got plenty of cargo room for the food, and it would be much cheaper to deliver that food, and that means more profitability for the people working in that industry. So once again, if you want a more profitable business and a lot more money coming in from those side gigs, or depending on where you are in life, maybe Uber Eats or grocery delivery services that a lot of people go with, it's going to be just insanely practical to do with the Aptera, because it's got the storage space, but it uses half as much power as a Model 3 rear-wheel drive while costing about half the price up front. So the cost savings there absolutely speak for themselves. But it's not all just about delivery services, of course. There's also the classic example of just retired couples out there. Lots of them that want a vehicle that's fun and sporty for the weekends, and their kids have all grown up. They're not driving around people anymore. They're just driving themselves where they want to go, and they want to do it in a futuristic and stylistic way that says, yes, I've made it, I've retired, I'm happy now, and I can afford to buy cool, techie, futuristic gadgets. People in retirement communities like showing off their cars to each other, and this one absolutely would turn a lot of heads, and of course still be speaking all of the environmental benefits. I also think that retired couples are more likely to be interested in a vehicle that can charge itself, because they don't want to have to add errands to their lives. They would rather just leave the car parked outside so they don't have to be all careful and cautious backing into a garage space. No, they just want to like get out of the car and leave it in the driveway, and that's good enough for them. A lot of retired couples in Florida, pretty sunny place. That's where I think Aptera would do pretty well. And of course, it's still a very fast vehicle, especially if you go with the tri-motor powertrain that can do 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, which is going to be plenty fast. And I think the Aptera design can be likable by people of all different walks of life. And those in the retired community that may be living off Social Security or looking for more cost-effective ways to get themselves around, I think the Aptera will be an incredibly tempting option for them. But also a fairly large demographic of people, singles, you know, people that live by themselves and don't often need that many other people to drive around with them. A lot of the time they're looking for a cost-effective way to get around, and a lot of them end up buying pretty inefficient or expensive sedans because, well, you know, they either want a Tesla or they want an Ioniq 5 or a Chevy Bolt or something like that. They want something that's practical, but they don't necessarily need that many seats in the car. And for those people, the Aptera is absolutely going to make a lot of sense. And on average, the vast majority of the vehicles on the road only have 1 or 2 people in them anyway. So even though the Aptera has that limitation, I don't think that means that the market for it is necessarily small, especially when it has this advantage of cost that you can't beat with any other 2-door vehicle out there, which is why I personally believe the Aptera will become the best-selling 2-door vehicle in the world, because it has a very functional reason to be 2-door. It's for the sake of efficiency, whereas other 2-door vehicles are, you know, decently efficient, but nowhere near as close to Aptera with their 100 watt-hours per mile. And this kind of ties into that demographic as well, but I think that even though Aptera has to be aware that this vehicle is not going to be a lot of households only vehicle, basically anyone who has kids is going to need a different vehicle to put the kids in when they're all driving together, but I think the Aptera will be incredibly popular as secondary commuter vehicles. So a lot of the time families want to have a car that everybody can ride in, so when they're going on a vacation or they're visiting family or grandparents, everybody can get in the car, obviously, and they can pack all of their suitcases, or the dads want to have a pickup truck so that they can haul some stuff around. But a lot of people have jobs that they got to commute to 30, 40 miles per day, and a lot of the time that vehicle they're just driving to their job is just themselves, and they'll keep around an old sedan or something for that. But if they found out that there's a vehicle that can literally charge itself and starts under $30,000, that vehicle is going to become insanely tempting, because now they won't have to run the inefficient gas-powered pickup truck, because there's not that many electric pickup trucks on the market, and while they're cool and they're coming, all of them are still going to be very, very expensive. People are lucky to get an F-150 Lightning under $60,000 these days, and that's basically the cheapest there is. Whereas the Aptera, people find out, hey, this doesn't need to be, you know, the most practical or the vehicle with the most cargo space, but if I need something to just get me to work and back in the most cost-effective way possible, this is going to be an excellent way to do that. Plus, if you want to make a little money on the side, of course, you can just do your DoorDash, Uber Eats, and you don't have to pay for gas, of course, but you also barely have to pay for electricity, assuming you opt for the solar package. So I think a lot of people that wouldn't normally have secondary vehicles would suddenly start to justify it once they found out how cheap to operate the Aptera is. I think if you factor in 10-year ownership cost, the Aptera is honestly one of the cheapest vehicles you could possibly buy new, because it's not that high a starting price, and the cost of operating it is astronomically lower than any other vehicle on the market. It's going to be cheaper than a Bolt. It's going to be cheaper than a Model 3 to maintain. Heck, there's even less tires to worry about. So yes, it may be a little bit more complicated with the wheel pants and having to jack up a three-wheeled vehicle to replace the tires, but even if you got to replace the tires in the future, there's only 3 instead of 4, and the insurance may even be lower because it's going to be registered as an auto cycle rather than a vehicle. So that may depend on your insurance provider what actually happens, but I know the Aptera has its compromises. You know, they're saying it's going to be safe, it's going to have a fairly durable roll cage and airbags, but I'm sure there's compromises by going with its design. It's a very wide vehicle, but ultimately I think the cost advantages is going to make it very, very interesting for many and very tempting to those who still want a low cost of operating vehicle that isn't a motorcycle. You know, you don't have to wear a helmet, you don't have to have a motorcycle's license, and you can still have HVAC. You know, you can still have air conditioning and heated interior when you're driving around, but because of the low cost of ownership, I think it will be tempting for retired couples, secondary commuter vehicles, delivery services, the food industry, island tourism, and of course single people that don't need to haul around that many others. And that's why I believe Sandy Monroe saying that he thinks Aptera will become a much bigger company than most people realize, probably going to get to the point of maybe 200,000, 300,000 vehicles per year. So that's why I'm excited for them, and I can't wait to talk about them again. Let me know what videos covering Aptera you guys would like to see in the future down below. And thank you to everyone on Patreon supporting this channel directly. It seriously helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.